Hi, and welcome back to the Hippie Martha Hormone Hour. I'm Ashley, your host, and recently I took a little space from the podcast world because honestly, life was lifing, if you know what I mean. Wrapping up our 7th year of homeschooling, spring sports, recitals, running a business, it's all been pretty full around here. And as much as I love this space, it's usually the first thing I put on the back burner when things get busy. But I'm really happy to be back. I've created something new that I'm really excited to share with you. A 3-month one-on-one mentorship. This is a high-touch, personalized space for women who are ready to stop guessing and finally understand their bodies. Whether you're navigating PCOS, preparing for pregnancy, dealing with postpartum depletion, migraines, painful or irregular cycles, experiencing histamine issues, or perimenopause, this is where we take a deeper, root cause approach and support your body with consistency and care. I only take a few clients each month, and I currently have 2 open spots for the month of May. So if that's something you've been looking for, we can absolutely connect. Now, before we dive in, I have to be completely honest with you. I've written, rewritten, recorded, and re-recorded this episode more times than I'd like to admit. I kept trying to make it perfect, but honestly, that's kind of the irony of this topic because body literacy, hormones, and cycles are nowhere near perfect. They are dynamic and fluid and always evolving based on how we are living and what lens we are perceiving our life through. So I keep reminding myself that this episode doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. And that's what I'm here for, to share the realness about a topic that you may or may not be familiar with, but one that is important, especially if you are in your middle-aged life. So let's get into it. Today, we are talking about a really important conversation, one that's been talked about a lot right now on social media, which is amazing, but there are a lot of ideas out there, and it's always hard to understand what to believe and what not to believe. And part of that is because midlife health hasn't been given the time, attention, or dedication of research that it deserves. So yes, if you haven't guessed it, we are going to be talking about perimenopause. After going back and forth on what I wanted to include, I realized there's no easy way to cover everything in one episode. So this is the beginning of a series. My goal is to give you digestible, grounded information so that you can actually understand what is going on in your body without feeling overwhelmed. I also plan on having guest speakers on here to give different perspectives in helping women through this time of their lives. Because my perspective is coming from that of an RN, fertility awareness, and hormone health background, I am by no means going to be treating, diagnosing, or writing scripts for HRT because that is completely out of my scope of practice. But I do want to have people on here who are knowledgeable in that area in case you should have or be seeking that information. Today, we are asking the question, what is perimenopause and how do you actually know if you are in it? Or more specifically, is it actually perimenopause in the first place? Because many of you, yes, you know who you are, have asked me, how do I know if I'm in perimenopause? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. So I want to rewind for a second and go back to a time where I started feeling a shift. This shift that I felt started at the age of 35. And honestly, that's part of what led me to leaving my job as a labor and delivery nurse and becoming a fertility awareness educator in the first place. I was trying to find answers that I just wasn't getting from my healthcare providers. It's like 35 becomes this trigger age where suddenly your body is like, hey, we're done ignoring this. And it was a time for me, and I know a time for some of you who have reached out, where your body just starts to feel off. Your mood is unpredictable, your sleep is weird, of course digestion could be better, brain fog starts settling in, along with mental load that just keeps piling on. Libido is either gone or on all the time, and you know what I mean. And your skin is like when it was when you were a teen. But now there's a new term for this, also known as cougar puberty. You find that your weight shifts for no reason. You haven't done anything different. You haven't changed anything up. And naturally, you're like, all right, let's ask Dr. Google or ChatGPT because your doctor just isn't doing jack squat about it. And the internet says, hey, welcome to perimenopause. And I just want to gently but firmly say, maybe it is and maybe it's not. I'm also seeing a lot of influencers in their early 30s who may be thinking they are in perimenopause because they are being told that every symptom is automatically perimenopause. And I really want to challenge that because here's the truth. Your symptoms are real, but the label might be wrong. So I want to start by properly defining terminology as to what perimenopause is, because language absolutely matters. My definition of perimenopause is the transition leading up to menopause, where hormones, especially estrogen and progesterone, begin to fluctuate and ovulation becomes less predictable due to lower ovarian reserves. Jane Hardwick Collins describes this transition as a rite of passage and is an expected process that happens to all women, whether that be natural, surgical, chemical, or premature. This process can begin several years before menopause actually happens and often spans through the mid-40s to early 50s, but not always. If these changes are happening before 40, we really want to take a closer look because that's actually considered a different diagnosis on its own, which is called primary ovarian insufficiency, or POI. This is a whole topic on its own. It deserves a deeper level of support and investigation. And then finally, when we talk about menopause, that is actually just one moment in time, 12 consecutive months without a period. That's it. After that, you are now considered postmenopausal. So let's review. Everything before that transition is considered perimenopause, and everything after that begins a new phase, which is defined as postmenopausal. Here's where things can become disconcerting. If you're under 40 or even in your mid-30s and are experiencing symptoms such as those of hot flashes, sleep issues, skin issues, and many others, I want to err on the side of caution by jumping straight into labeling it as perimenopause. We truly need to ask better questions. Those same symptoms can come from years of gaslighting, past histories of childhood trauma, birth trauma, previous experiences within the body, thyroid dysfunction, gut imbalances, blood sugar issues, chronic stress or burnout, post-birth control hormone disruption, and so much more. So if we skip over those, we miss the opportunity to actually support the root cause. And I want to be very clear here. I am not dismissing your symptoms. Your body is absolutely talking to you. Whether or not you are in perimenopause, now is the perfect time to start listening. So how do you actually know if you're in perimenopause? Well, this is a very valid question, and here's the honest answer. There are different phases to perimenopause, and not all of them can be tested. When we look at cycles and look at cycle charts, we can actually kind of distinguish what phase of perimenopause you are in. Typically, in early perimenopause, you might notice subtle changes while cycles remain regular. This is the first phase. In the second phase of perimenopause, you might notice the onset of irregular periods, which we will talk about later. Your cycles might start to transition from 28 days to 30 days to 36 days to 40 days and so on in length, where ovulation is getting further and further apart. And finally, late perimenopause is typically within that 12 months prior to the final cessation of your cycle. There is the option to do advanced hormone testing to see where your hormones are in this phase of life. From a clinical perspective, hormones are fluctuating and are ever so slightly changing. You don't just wake up one day and say, I must be in perimenopause. Well, actually some do, because they are ignoring what has been happening in their lives for the past few years or even decades. But if you go in and request testing, you may be able to see that in a blood, urine, or saliva level. However, if you go in and request labs on a random day to see if you're in perimenopause, you're probably wasting your time and money because it might not tell you very much. Now, labs can be helpful, absolutely, but we have to use them in context with our life and our cycles. Remember, I am your cycle hormone fairy godmother. What I look at, and this is fertility awareness cycle charts. Not only can I help you interpret what's going on, but I can help you get better lab testing based off of where you are at within your cycle. And when I'm talking about charting your cycles, I'm referring to the data that you collect about your own fertility biomarkers, including basal body temperature, cervical fluid, possibly cervical position and opening, as well as secondary biomarkers. This is what becoming cycle literate means, something that the majority of us in our 40s or even 50s were never taught. If you go to the doctor and they want to get labs drawn, these are the things they might look at. The first one is FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, which is triggered by the brain and communicates with the ovary, stimulating the follicle and telling the ovary to make estrogen. In perimenopause, our follicles become reduced. When we are in the later stages, FSH will start to pulse higher and higher, seeking that connection with a follicle or estrogen in the ovary. On a lab test, FSH may be extremely high while estradiol is low, which can be a good indicator that you are in the later stages of perimenopause. If estrogen is within normal ranges, you should typically have normal FSH levels. If you are testing LH, it may be non-existent, especially if estrogen is low. Or if you have longer cycles, you could have multiple LH surges because your body is really trying to ovulate. LH pushes the egg out of the ovary. Estradiol can fluctuate high and low depending on ovarian reserves and how you metabolize estrogen. Because estrogen is stored in visceral fat, you may notice fewer estrogen-related symptoms than someone who has a lower body fat content. This is actually one of the ways the body protects against estrogen loss. But in our society, it is often the first thing midlife women notice and struggle with. Progesterone is another hormone that we look at that is found in the luteal phase. Now remember, if ovulation is not happening, progesterone will not be present. The adrenals do make little pulses of progesterone, but not enough to sustain the neural protection that it gives. Testosterone also may be non-existent or extremely low. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is there are varying levels of what your labs can tell us versus what your cycle charts can show us. And these levels can change day to day. If you test once, you're only seeing one snapshot, not the full picture. This is why you might be told your labs look normal, but they aren't reflecting how you feel. And both can be completely true. So instead of relying on labs, we look at patterns over time. We look at them on your cycle charts, along with your life and family history. When we look at all these combined, we can create a much clearer picture of what's going on and what phase of perimenopause you may be in. We also need to talk about something that has been lost in our modern culture, which includes the modern rites of passage. Oftentimes, those going through perimenopause experience a change, just like one would experience in adolescence and again in motherhood. Those first two typically are celebrated. I don't know about you, but I have yet to hear perimenopause be celebrated. In fact, I feel that it is very demonized, and we tend to treat it like it is something that needs to be fixed or medically managed. And in some cases, that is true. But when we are able to step back, it is something to bear witness to. I recently switched my mindset beliefs on perimenopause when listening to a wonderful podcast with Jane Hardwick Collins in it. And she introduces the reframing of perimenopause and menopause as a time of sagescence. So similar to the journey of adolescence and of matrescence, but instead reframing it, she poses the question of what are we doing to support those going through a midlife passage? And she poses that sagescence is the rite of passage of midlife. From my perspective as an RN, I was taught that there's not a whole lot you can do or treat it medically, and that is my background. But what I am learning is that by taking a step away from that medical management, I see a different perspective needing to happen during this time to support not only myself, but others going through it. Just like with adolescents, we tend to give them space and let them figure out life. And then motherhood, at becoming a mother, we support them as best as we can to bring them food, taking care of them, or at least we should. I know not everyone gets that rite of passage, but during perimenopause, we really need to learn how to take care of ourselves. Another interesting thought that I learned from Jane Hardwick Collins was that she states that it really is a special time where we become more self-conscious and motivated to take care of ourselves, and that's specifically due to the loss of estrogen. When we look at estrogen, estrogen is defined as the mothering hormone. And so when we have that loss, it makes us take a step back and ask questions as to why am I doing all of the things? For instance, the laundry, the dishes, food, dinner. I mean, you can apply it to so many aspects. And I know I have applied it to my life as well. And more recently, I've been relying on my husband and children to take over some of these tasks that I just don't feel motivated to do anymore. She also states that it is time where we are gifted with the opportunity to heal all the unhealed parts of ourselves. So all the things that came before us are now a time to stop, release, and let go of. She also talks about how we can fully align with the lunar cycle once we are postmenopausal, and that lunar cycle can replace our menstrual cycle and be our visionary for capacity and intuition to grow and grow, especially in leadership and even our orgasms as they get stronger and longer as we age. So I just really want to kind of pause and think about and to connect with the thought that this time is just for us. Just as our bodies were made to reproduce and make babies, so are our bodies able to go through this transition, and we can either do it with grace or the hard way. I personally feel this phase is asking us to slow down, set boundaries, reevaluate our priorities, and listen more deeply to our bodies. And that, my friends, can also feel really uncomfortable. I know for me personally, who has an extremely busy life and who thrives off the busyness, it almost seems like there's no way to slow down. But for me, I am also a high performer and a recovering perfectionist. So I would say yes to everything. And now I'm noticing that it is a no unless it's a hell yes. I'm reevaluating these priorities in my life and asking myself, is it going to fill my cup or is it going to pour it out? So as you start to enter this phase, I want you to reevaluate and start taking care of yourself, which I'm telling you can be extremely powerful. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? How can I fix this? I really want you to ask yourself, what is my body asking for? Because perimenopause, when it is happening, is not a disease. It's not a failure or the beginning of an end. It's literally a shift, a recalibration, and an invitation. If this episode shifted your perspective even just a little bit, I would absolutely love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear this information as well. And if you're realizing that you've been guessing about your body instead of truly understanding it, this is exactly the work that I do. I offer a Peri 101 course that's pre-recorded, as well as a private coaching specifically for this stage of life. Because sometimes we just need another wise woman to guide us and support us through. In this next episode, I'm going to take you inside my personal experience, what I thought was hormonal chaos versus what was actually going on and what changed everything for me. So be sure to follow and keep listening for more. Thank you so much for being here. We'll talk soon. Bye.